every night I was logging on to a porn site and looking at what I thought was perfection for 1 to 2 hours a night, looking at thousands of different bodies, manicured. You're going to get this impression that that's what a normal body looks like. And then when you have just a normal sexual experience with another human being and they're not perfect, you start thinking, oh, they're not good enough.
Welcome to Forged in Silence podcast, addressing issues men face but rarely talk about. Today, we have a guest with us trying to put an episode on to speak about this topic, and I'm super excited to actually dig into this topic and hear Jeremy share with us his experience and solutions. We are going to talk about porn, the big porn. And yes, the topic that is taboo, that has got loaded with shame and guilt and a lot of other things, but we're going to have a really good, honest conversation with Jeremy about this. I'm super excited to shed some light on this and hopefully alleviate some shame for some men out there that are dealing with this, that feel alone. So Jeremy, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you, man.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So before we get any farther, Jeremy, how are you? Really?
I'm doing fantastic. It's I live in Thailand, so it's morning time over here where I am. And, I know we kind of have this tendency to just say, yeah, I'm doing well, but I really am doing fantastic. Like last few days has been phenomenal, playing lots of sports. Sun has been shining and business is going well. So I really can't complain and just feeling really happy in my life right now. Not
Awesome.
always the case. I will say that, but today is a good day. Yeah.
Gotta love it. All right. Who do you want to ask next?
Robbie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing better. Then I had a little call that I had to go into work and had to cancel some stuff and put Steve in a little bit of a hot spot. That didn't happen. I'm here. Yeah, I'm feeling really good right now. I'm in a good place. Had a good conversation, so I'm excited for this conversation. Like Steve said, we've been waiting for this one, and the discussion needs to be had. So I'm super excited and ready to dive right in. So Steve, how are you? Really?
I am feeling way more relaxed than I was last episode. It's back-to-back recordings, way more relaxed. That conversation with Jared about self-compassion, really, every time we sit down and record a podcast, I always feel better afterwards. There's something about having honest, real conversations with other men, other people. It doesn't even have to be men, but just other people generally. But especially when we record a podcast episode here, I can feel the tension go away. And after an episode, I'm definitely more fulfilled and more heart-filled, and my cup is way more full than it was when I started. So I feel pretty good. I'm pretty chill, and I'm also excited to hear what Jeremy has to say. It's a topic that I'm curious about, because I know it's something that men face but don't fucking talk about at all. Jeremy, just in case you wanted to know if we could fucking swear, we're doing it right now. Yeah. So I am excited. I'm excited for this topic, and I'm excited to hear the share. So Jeremy, the floor is yours. Tell us a little bit about yourself and then dive right in, my man.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just really appreciate you guys having me on, because it's a weird topic for some people. It's sensitive, it's taboo, gets swept under the rug, despite the fact of it being incredibly prevalent in our society. I mean, it's pervasive, it's everywhere. You open up Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, and just kind of sexualized content is everywhere, and porn is just beneath the surface. So many guys deal with this on a regular basis, and women too, but we can just talk mostly about guys today. It's more of a men's issue. Who I am, I'm a coach. I work with men. I help them overcome porn addiction. My background before that, I was a meditation teacher for about 10 years, teaching mindfulness and self-compassion. And before that, my background is in the sciences. So I was working towards a PhD in genetics and genomics, and my background is really in the world of science. But is all built on the foundation of just my own personal experience of recovering from porn addiction and going through that struggle and realizing how harmful porn addiction can be on your relationships and your self-worth and your happiness. So going through that myself and realizing that there are a lot of guys out there who need some support and need to not feel alone. I started doing this work, helping men around 7 years ago, and it's been incredibly fulfilling to be able to support guys doing this work.
Amazing. Really amazing. We, like anybody in addiction, we need more people to step up, and especially in the realm that you're working in. I appreciate what you do for us, man.
Start off like how you got into it and how you knew it was a problem. Like all those,
Yeah,
like, kind of take us from the beginning, then where you found that crack, whatever, that decided
Mm,
this is a problem I need to change, or whatever that was.
yeah.
I'm not going to call it a rock bottom because I'm sick of that term. So
Why are you sick of that term? I'm curious.
I think society has made rock bottom into this term of like a shitstorm, and everyone's rock bottom is
Mm.
completely different. It's their own story. It's not what is portrayed on TV or the movies, or what religion or anyone that wants to stand above us and throw down to us. Everyone has their own story with rock bottom, and it's all okay. It doesn't need to be, jail time or DUI or unfortunately death, and with gambling, losing your house, losing all that. My term is everyone has their rock bottom, and it's okay. Whatever it is, whatever got you there, and you
Yeah.
turn the page and start this new chapter, it's okay. We don't need to sensationalize it. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I love that perspective. And I can talk about whether you want to call it a rock bottom or
Turning
something else,
point.
but my turning point, and it's very different from what most people think of. It's not, it wasn't jail time. It was on a sunny day in Davis, California when nothing was going wrong, but I had this internal shift that was my rock bottom. But to give a little context, like how I got into porn was just very, very much this way that most guys get into porn. I started looking at comic book characters that were attractive, at the lingerie catalogs that would come in the mail. I remember the Macy's
Victoria's
catalog,
Secret.
the underwear section. Yeah,
Yep.
Victoria's Secret. Those were my early interactions with things, images that made my body feel good. And I remember like, wow, when I look at these pictures, I get a certain tingle in my body and that feels good. And so as a young, curious boy, that became something that I used to feel good. And it slowly progressed. We got dial-up internet at home, and you started to be able to download one photo at a time, and you would see line by line it would come in, and yeah. Kids these days are so spoiled. They get it instantly.
Yeah.
They
Boom,
didn't
they
have
got the
to
whole
wait
video.
like we did. Yeah. So it slowly progressed. And I remember to the point where when I was in college, I was watching, by then tube sites had come around, high speed internet was there. And I was watching porn on a nightly basis. Every night I would go into my room, I would lock the door, and for 1, sometimes 2 hours, I would look at porn on these tube sites. And, the interesting thing that I think a lot of people can resonate with is just the way that it's a slow progression over time. It starts as this very innocent curiosity about sexuality. And over time, it builds up into this behavior that's almost autopilot. It's almost, you don't even think about it. It's just, yeah, this is what I do. I didn't question it. I didn't know, hey, this is unhealthy. It was just the thing I did every night. And then I started to notice some of the ways that it was impacting my life. And that's where the turning point started to happen. I started to notice the ways it was impacting my relationships, my views on intimacy, my expectations of what women's bodies should look like, or expectations of what my body should look like or be able to do and perform. And the turning point for me, I remember it very clearly. I was a student at UC Davis at the time. That's where I did my bachelor's degree in genetics. And I graduated from UC Davis, and I stuck around at the university for another year doing research. So I was around 23, 24 years old. And my life was amazing. I had a lot of friends, had been the captain of a sports team. I had a lot of romantic relationships, a lot of lovers. I was a stellar student, graduated with highest honors in genetics. So my life was really phenomenal in a lot of ways. And I remember this one day walking down the street. And again, skies were blue, sun was out, my life was good. I was walking down the street and I saw these two young women walking in front of me. They were probably freshmen or sophomores in college. And I remember just being so consumed by this feeling of lust and staring at their bodies and sexualizing their bodies and feeling this strong lust and desire. And it was in that moment that I just felt so empty inside. It was like this big black hole, this big void opened up inside of me that just said, unless you go have that, you won't be happy. And it was just this craving, this feeling of I need to have that thing. And if you don't get it, you won't be happy. And there's so many things I realized in that moment. The first thing I realized was just how much lust was a state of suffering. That when I was lusting after women, lusting after things I didn't have, that's what suffering is. When you want something that you don't have, you're suffering. And I was walking around, all day, every day, just suffering because I was always looking at what I didn't have rather than what I did have. I wasn't looking at the relationships in my life, the friendships, the good grades in school. I was just focused on what I didn't have. So there was this recognition of how much I was suffering despite how good things were in my life. The other thing I realized was just I would never be happy if I kept living that way. That if I always walked around, it didn't matter what I accomplished, how much money I made, how much success I had in my career. If I kept looking at what I didn't have, I would never be happy. And the other thing that happened to me in that moment was probably the most profound. And this is where I had this realization. I started to see the path that I was on and the future that was in front of me. And I saw very clearly, if I keep walking down this path, I'm going to be some creepy 65-year-old dude who's hitting on girls at college bars. And I saw that future for myself. And I realized if I keep watching porn in this way and sexualizing women and objectifying and lusting after someone new, all the time, I'm going to be that creepy dude who's at the bar trying to hit on girls half his age. And I realized that was a dark future and it wasn't the future I wanted. And I realized how much my mind had been hijacked by lust and that I was a slave to that lustful desire. I wasn't in control. So that was the turning point for me. That was sort of my rock bottom moment of realizing just how screwed up my mind had become because of the porn that I was watching. That sent me on a bit of an existential crisis, got me interested in the topic of what is happiness? Is happiness even possible? And I ended up going to some bookstores and finding books on positive psychology and neuroplasticity, and then found this book on Buddhist philosophy and realized so much of the suffering that I was experiencing was because of the way I'd been training my mind to be filled with lust. And that this fundamental understanding of neuroplasticity is that what you frequently do with your mind trains the mind in that way. So if you're constantly
want more of it.
Exactly.
So like you're watching porn 2 hours a night and you're spending that much time with your mind on these things, objectifying women, wanting them in your bed. I'm making things up, so go ahead and correct me. I'm just guessing. Wanting them in your bed, wanting to do whatever to them, with them, for them, all of those things probably. The more you consume, the more you want it.
Exactly. So there was this one phrase that I read in a book early on when I had this kind of crisis moment in my life. And it was from a neuroscientist. And the phrase was, neurons that fire together wire together. And it's the understanding that the more frequently you use certain neural pathways, the stronger those neural pathways become. And so what I realized is that every time I logged onto a porn site and activated the neural pathway for lust, craving after some woman, I was strengthening that neural pathway. I was creating the grooves in my mind for that pathway to be bigger and stronger. So that was more and more my autopilot habitual response was to lust, objectify. And again, that lust was that state of suffering. And so, essentially whenever I left the house, I was just lusting because I had created these strong neural pathways in my life around lusting and suffering and looking at what I didn't have. Now, the cool thing was that the flip side is also true. If you want things that lead to happiness, if you want to be happy, if you want to be filled with gratitude or compassion or patience, you can strengthen those neural pathways too. If you want your habitual response to be gratitude, 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 you just train your mind in that way. And that's what meditation is. I thought meditation was this fluffy spiritual nonsense, for weak minded people. And it turns out it's strength training for the mind. It's like saying, do you want bigger biceps? Okay, train your biceps. Do you want more gratitude? Train the neural pathways of gratitude in your mind. So that was the turning point for me, was realizing how much my mind had been hijacked by porn and by lust, but I could train my mind in a healthier direction.
You were talking about.
Go ahead, Robbie.
So it sounds, you were talking about this, and it sounds like you had some, self-limiting beliefs that was created from porn. Am I wrong?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's very interesting to me because I myself, have self-limiting beliefs, and the paths or something that I've taken affect those. But hearing you say that that's where it went because you were lusting all the time and suffering on something that you couldn't have, so it changed your self-worth and it rewired your brain essentially, is very fascinating because I've put a lot of things together, but I haven't heard it put exactly that way, but it makes total sense to me. I was doing all this, and as I was doing it, my self-limiting beliefs got bigger and bigger because I couldn't have what I wanted because of this pathway I was driving. That's just fascinating me. It just makes a lot more sense why our addict minds do the things that we do once we get addicted to whatever it is.
Yeah. We start to believe we need that substance or behavior in order to be happy. We get tunnel vision, thinking if it's alcohol, if it's weed, if it's whatever, gambling, video games, we think I need this thing in order to be happy, and we forget all the repercussions and consequences. We just think, I got to get my fix, and if I don't get it, I won't be happy. And we believe that lie. And it's so wild because when you're out of it, you can see how preposterous it is. But when you're in it, it's like a physiological need that your body's just screaming at you and says, you need that thing. And if you don't get it, you're going to die.
Yeah.
And that's the lie that we have to see through.
Right. It's like the need is going to soothe the discomfort that I feel from having the need.
Yeah.
Right. So it is literally if I do this, it's going to hurt, but I'm going to feel better.
Right.
But it'll hurt,
it's like
but I'll
throwing
feel
gasoline
better
on a fire, thinking it'll put the fire out, or drinking salt water to quench your thirst.
Right. And it's like, it is just from my own experience, it's a nasty cycle. Can you tell me how it affected your relationships? You're lusting. It's a thing that you're still doing, spending probably a fair amount of time at some point alone by yourself in that. How did it affect your relationships?
Yeah, that was one of the other things I realized on that day when I had that turning point was, one of the things I realized, which I already talked about, was just how much suffering was caused from that lusting mentality. But the other thing I noticed was how much porn was screwing with my expectations around what healthy intimacy and healthy sex looks like, and also what, unrealistic expectations about what my partner's bodies should look like. If every night I was logging on to a porn site and looking at what I thought was perfection for 1 to 2 hours a night, looking at thousands of different bodies, manicured, you're going to get this impression that that's what a normal body looks like. And then when you have just a normal sexual experience with another human being and they're not perfect, you start thinking, oh, they're not good enough. I need to, because this is what you're doing when you log on to porn. You're scrolling through hundreds or thousands of thumbnails saying, what's the perfect one that I want to watch tonight? I need something slightly better. And so you end up developing this habit of saying, I want something slightly better. And that translates onto your relationships as well. Because that's what you're doing when you log onto a tube site is you're saying, okay, what's the best thing I can find? What's the unicorn? And you scroll, you could look for hours looking for that next video. And so your brain gets addicted to novelty. That's what I was noticing also. It's like I wasn't addicted. I wasn't like looking for, okay, what's the one that I'll be satisfied with and content with and can grow old with together. My brain was just thinking every time I see a new video or a new face, I get that little dopamine hit. So I was starting to become addicted to just having something new, having something different. And that, again, it's disastrous for your relationships because instead of saying, how can I deepen my satisfaction and contentment with the person I'm with? It's, I'm a little bit bored of this. I need something new to stimulate me.
Did you ever get to like how can I use you more to meet that need for new?
Yeah, I mean, I was using women all the time. I mean, it was like I wasn't treating them like human, like a partner in a relationship. It was just, oh, this was, I want to have sex with you. And you're just something to obtain, an experience to obtain. I've fortunately never got into the really dark stuff, when I didn't get into any of that, very fortunately. But I was on the road to head there.
That
I
leads
mean,
down that
yeah.
path, doesn't it?
Yeah, because you become, accustomed, you become desensitized. And so you need something more extreme in order to get the same hit. And I could see where that was going. I could see, oh, this is a pathway that if I keep walking down this path, I'm just going to need more extreme, more novel all the time.
So you were asking more of yourself to try and perform probably like what you wanted. And you were asking more of the women to perform what in a way that you wanted, that more
Yeah.
extreme or kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the way it manifested was more that I would just get bored in a relationship and think, oh, there's something's, she's not perfect. She's not exactly what I'm looking for. So yeah, let me find someone new. So I wasn't like asking them to do any kind of weird thing.
Weird
Like I hadn't
shit.
gotten into any of that yet, fortunately. I'm
Yep.
very happy it never escalated there. But it was more just realizing the ways that I was abandoning relationships with women who could have been amazing partners for me. And rather than saying, hey, this is actually an amazing woman who's intelligent and funny and beautiful, and maybe I should learn how to be in a relationship, it was, well, I'm kind of bored of the sex now. I must need something different. And that was when I started to realize, whoa, this is the porn behavior of swiping for a new video, trying to find something new. And that's one of the ways it can really damage, the minds of young men.
Robbie,
Might help if I unmute myself. Sorry.
that would help.
I said a few things and I'm like, no one's listening to me. Then I just realized, thanks, Steve. When you were in these relationships with these women, I'm assuming you were still viewing porn nightly. So there's the dynamic. Were you like hiding it from them? Were you open about it? Did you talk about it with them, or was it
Yeah,
a secret
I was so
thing?
ashamed. It was,
So it was
I did not talk about it with anyone.
Okay.
I didn't talk about it with friends. It was, it was so fascinating because it was the big skeleton in my closet, this thing that, I would be so afraid if anybody would find out that I watched porn, again, go into my room, lock my door. And I was terrified if anybody thought that I watched porn. And so I hid it from everyone. I remember even to this day, after I went through this kind of recovery process and stopped watching porn, it took me another 6 years, even after I'd completely stopped watching porn. It took me another 6 years before I could open up to another man about the fact that I had ever even watched porn. And even then, even 6 years after being sober from it, it was still terrifying to admit, yeah, I used to watch porn and used to really struggle with it. And so it was something that, I wouldn't talk about it to anyone. It was this thing, my kind of dirty little secret that I tried to keep. And yet I never thought, hey, maybe this is unhealthy and I should stop doing it. It was just, this is the thing that I do. But I have to hide it from people. And I know there's a lot of guys out there that way who don't question, hey, this is something I can actually stop. And yet it's incredibly shameful and sensitive and a secret that we all keep, which is why this conversation is so important. There's so many guys out there who don't feel comfortable talking about it, despite how prevalent it is in our society.
Was the keeping a secret a novelty in that too, knowing that you'd get caught? Did you get off on that too?
No, that wasn't really. I know that is kind of a component for some guys. For me, it wasn't part of the excitement. I mean, it definitely added. When you're doing something taboo, it's part of the chemical concoction that makes it so exhilarating
Mm-hmm.
to some extent. But I wasn't, getting off on the taboo or the fearness of it.
Okay.
So I think this is probably a good spot to dive into healthy shame.
Mm. Yeah.
Before we hit the record button, you mentioned healthy shame. I wrote that sucker down because I think this is a great probably space to dive into this topic where we're at in the conversation, or what it was kind of like, and then your turning point. And so you have the shame that keeps you hiding and locking the door is a phenomenal example of that. And then you have the healthy shame. Tell me about that, because I'm curious about this one. Even myself, I'd love to hear you put words to that one.
Yeah. So in the recovery world, I mean, the topic of shame is one of the most important topics. It's one of the most common things we talk about, letting go of shame, because shame is the driver of addiction, right? It causes us to isolate. All of us who are in this recovery world, we know about shame, because it's like, yeah, shame exacerbates the addiction. You got to be in community. You got to learn how to open up and let go of the shame. And that's beautiful. Probably the most important advice. At the same time, a lot of people throw the baby out with the bathwater. They throw shame out completely. And some people go too far and say, okay, shame is all bad and you shouldn't have any shame about. And there is a component of shame that is healthy. And it's fascinating in Buddhist philosophy. There's a lot of Buddhism it's not really a religion. It's more like a philosophy of training the mind. It's all centered around understanding what are the wholesome emotions and skillful emotions that you should cultivate, like love and compassion and patience and kindness and discipline. And what are unhealthy or unskillful emotions that you should let go of, like greed, craving, anger, hatred, delusion, those kinds of things. What's interesting is all the skillful, helpful emotions are pleasant. They feel good. Love feels good, kindness feels good, compassion, patience, they feel pleasant. And all of these unskillful emotions, they feel kind of bad, like anger, greed, lust, jealousy. They have this unpleasant feeling to them. But there's two exceptions. So there are these two emotions that are said to be skillful. They're healthy emotions, but they're unpleasant. They feel bad. And those two in Buddhism are called the two guardians of the world. So they're the two things that protect us. And the two emotions are moral dread and moral shame. So these two are known as the two guardians of the world. And when you think about it, it makes sense. Like moral shame is that feeling when you've done something wrong and you feel bad about that thing that you did that was wrong. That's a healthy thing to feel because it protects us from doing it again. It protects us from causing harm to ourselves or to other people. So when we feel that kind of moral shame, that feeling of, wow, I did something harmful. I hurt someone, I hurt myself, I caused harm in the world, and that feels bad. That's a protector. Because if we didn't feel that, we would just go do it again. Right? And so to actually lean into that kind of shame, where it says, yeah, I did this unskillful thing and I feel bad about that, that's my protector because it's going to stop me from causing that harm again in the future. So that's the side of healthy shame that we actually want to lean into, and we need it, particularly as men. We need to have those kind of guardrails and those boundaries for ourselves that say, I acted out of integrity, it caused harm, and I need to take ownership of the harm that it caused and not escape that feeling and not pretend it didn't happen, but take ownership of it.
You know, when I got into recovery, I think Steve probably has some stories of this too, where we couldn't lie to ourselves anymore, like with everything. And I believe this is that moral shame where, you know, I would just go into state parks or places where you'd have to pay to park and I'd never pay. And I'd be like, well, just if I get the ticket, I'll pay it or I won't. I remember this time I was driving and there was this place I wanted to go hike and was pay to park. And I'd been sober for about a year and a half. I turned around and drove out. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't lie to myself. If I lied to myself with this one little thing, I know where that snowball effect will go. And that's one example I know where that moral shame, well, you know, I recognized it and had the awareness. And after that, there was a lot more that just kept happening. And it was just like,
Yeah.
it's the protector, right? It's like you get this compass afterwards and it's like, well, I don't want to do that. I can't lie to myself or whatever it may be, but I really like that. I think
it's
I
that
like it.
integrity piece. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the compass is a beautiful way of describing it.
It's no one's going to know. No one's going to see it. I don't have to tell anyone. And I can still get away with it anyways and still get what I want out of it. Not so bad. Why not? Except for I still have to answer to myself at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I've done very similar things. Right when I quit drinking, I started smoking even more than I did before. And all of the things that I was doing when I was drinking, I started doing when I was smoking. I told myself I would never smoke in my vehicle. I started smoking in my vehicle. I told myself I wouldn't, smoke at home, and I started smoking at home. And I told myself I wouldn't smoke, at work. I mean, I did. I was smoking at work anyways, but like the point was like I'd pull over and have a smoke so I could have another one before I got home. And I would wait for opportunities, and I would lie about, literally I went to the gas station and I would buy smokes when I bought gas, and I would put less gas in the truck. So the bill would look like I filled the truck, but part of it would be cigarettes. Right? Like that was the stuff that I did when I was drinking. And I finally got pissed off at myself on my way into work the one morning while I was smoking in the truck, going like, the fuck am I doing? This is the light bulb went on. I was like 6 months sober, and this is the same stupid shit I was doing when I was drinking. It's all of the same behaviors, just transposed into using something else. And I was like, wow, this is bullshit. So I get into work and I go about my morning routine, and it's 9:30, smoke break time. So I go outside and I light up a smoke, and I'm like halfway through the smoke. And I'm like, I'm never doing this shit again. And I put the fucking half a smoke out, and I threw the rest of the pack out. I walked up to my office, and I called up my wife at the time, and I said, if I tell you the truth right now about all of this stuff, I'm not going to do this again. So this is going to be uncomfortable, but I just quit smoking, and here's where I smoked, and this is how long I've been smoking for, and whatever it is. And I said, the consequences from here on out, I'm willing to accept. And that was it. That was the last time I had a smoke. It was the same thing I did when I quit drinking. So it was like the lack of integrity is something that can definitely leak and leach into life the more I allow it to leach. I think that is kind of the point that you were trying to get at.
Yeah. I mean, I think you guys both said it really well. Like you can tell yourself the lie that, oh, I can get away with this and nobody will know, but you still have to answer to yourself. And that integrity, if you're out of integrity, you will suffer whether or not somebody knows about it. And that's I mentioned there's two guardians. So one is the moral shame of, hey, I did this unskillful thing. And then the moral dread is the flip side of that, which is that fear of the future if I do this unskillful thing, which was, Robbie, what you were talking about driving in. It's like, yeah, I know I can get away with this, but moral dread is that thing that says, hey, if wise people knew that I was doing this, they would look down on this. I know that if somebody was seeing me do this, like, this isn't right. And that moral dread of, yeah, I'm about to do this unskillful thing, and I know I could get away with it, but if people knew that I was doing this, that wouldn't be right. And you have to answer to yourself. And a lot of recovery comes down to that moment where you say, I can't keep living like this anymore.
No.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there. Maybe not a lot of listeners. There's a couple of guys out there that recognize, I can't do this. I can't live this way anymore. It is gone from something that I've enjoyed. It was something that I enjoyed, and now it's just something that I do to alleviate discomfort, and it's not a habit I want to continue to indulge in.
Yeah.
And
It's so funny with
it's hurting
a lot
me.
of addiction. There's a feeling that they've shown that there's a less and less actual enjoyment in the behavior, but more of a feeling of needing to do it anyway. Like there's more of this compulsion. I have to do this, even though I'm enjoying it less and less. And that's when you really know you're trapped in addiction, is if you're not even enjoying the act of doing it, but you still feel like you need it more and more.
Right. So if you had your turning point, you realized it wasn't something that was serving you anymore. You wanted to do something different. What did you do? How did you you're like, I mean, it took you 6 years to talk about it. So you have a 6-year window now of, what were you, 24-year-old young man? And what did you do? You had, in 6 years before you said a word about it, really, what did you do? How did you help yourself? What did you
Yeah.
go? Who helped you?
Yeah. So I was very fortunate. I mentioned, I found some books, and one of those books fundamentally changed everything for me. It was a book called Happiness by Mathieu Ricard. So he's this guy who he's born in France, has a background in science, went to the Pasteur Institute, was working on a PhD in molecular biology, and ended up traveling to India and kind of meeting, monks out there, and became a Tibetan monk. And he's known as the happiest man in the planet. Like, they've done studies on him, MRIs and CAT scans, and all these things. And he wrote this book blending science and Eastern wisdom. And when I read that book, it fundamentally changed everything for me. That was the book that opened up my mind to neuroplasticity and training the mind. So from there, I was very fortunate enough to travel to Asia and start going on these meditation retreats and learning how to work with my mind. And that just became a huge part, not just of my recovery, but of my life in general, of leading a happier, more fulfilling life. And so I started going on these silent meditation retreats. You might have heard of them. They're usually around 10 days. There's no reading or writing or talking. There's no journaling, no electronics. You're just with yourself and your emotions for those 10 days. And it's a great opportunity to work with your mind and start to train your mind in ways that you want it. So for most of those, 6 years before I started talking about it to other people, I was really just diving deeply into meditation and those kinds of practices. That's where I started teaching meditation, and that became a big part of my life. So a lot of the work that I do now with guys is teaching them some of these fundamental skills of mindfulness, meditation, self-compassion, because it's such an important component for recovery. No matter what recovery system you do, whether you do, a 12-step approach or some other approach, you need self-awareness. You need mindfulness. You need the ability to see what's happening in your mind in the present moment. As you said, that's what addiction is. It's a way to run away from pain, an attempt to to self-medicate from some unpleasant emotion. And if you're not able to see that happening, you'll just be on autopilot and you'll keep doing it before you have the chance to do anything about it. But with mindfulness, you actually get that clarity to see, oh, there's a difficult emotion arising right now. And I'm noticing this desire to run away, to escape, to numb out. Do I want to act on this? Or do I want to act in a different way? So mindfulness is that thing that gives you the ability to take action in those moments rather than just being on autopilot, being a
It's a
slave
means
to it.
to slow it down.
Yeah. You might have heard of that Viktor Frankl quote, um, between stimulus and response. Have you heard that quote before?
I have. Do you want to say it again?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite quotes. So, funnily enough, it's not actually Viktor Frankl. It's Stephen Covey summarizing the work of Viktor Frankl, and I got misattributed. Anyways, the quote is, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is your power to choose your response. And in your response lies your growth and your freedom. So it's this idea that between stimulus, something happening, and your response, there's a space there. But if you don't have access to that space, there's a stimulus and a reaction, immediate reaction. And usually that reaction is running away, numbing out, it's our compulsive behaviors.
Essentially
If
fight
you-
or flight at that point.
Yeah. Well, it's the fight flight thing. A lot of people know fight, flight, or freeze. There's actually a fourth F in there, the fight, flight, freeze, or fuck. So it's actually all four of those things are part of that fight or flight response. It's I gotta run away, I gotta fight, I gotta freeze, or I gotta fuck this, And it's that habitual kind
Yeah.
of primal response reaction energy. But if you get access to that space, which mindfulness gives us, you can then choose how to respond. And in your response lies all your growth and freedom as a man and as a human. It's all in that space. Every aspect of your growth and your freedom is in that space where you get to choose how to respond. Otherwise, you're just playing out your conditioned habits.
You're literally, that's the autopilot.
Autopilot, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
basically subconscious running the show. Just however you however you decided or reacted in ways growing up are manifesting in that response. Those are the guideposts that we bounce in between all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's just habitual, whatever, like you said, whatever you learned as a kid. For some people, it's the autopilot is, okay, let me have a smoke. For some people, it's, I need a drink. For some people, it's, I need to go home and watch porn. Now people are getting into vaping. Like, it's just whatever is your
Whatever.
autopilot habitual response to numb out, to escape pain, to feel pleasure.
It's soothe, right? That's isn't
Mhm.
it? Is it not just a form of soothing a discomfort?
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where, another really important thing in recovery is this concept of equanimity, which is probably the most important part of Buddhist meditation is training your mind to be equanimous, or to have this trait of equanimity, which is the ability to be with something unpleasant without running away from it.
Sitting with it.
Yeah.
My favorite
To
thing
have
to
an
do.
unpleasant, to sit in the shit and say, like, okay, like, this is an unpleasant emotion. I don't need to numb out or run away from this. I can just be with this.
What I've known 40 years, then getting sober, then having to sit with those things, that made my recovery, right? I was willing to sit in there. Learning early on, I was willing to sit in there, give that space. And it's very interesting where I see people that they get into that discomfort and they find another addiction to cross addict, to numb the pain, right? Whatever it is, there's multiple things we could cross addict to. And I caught mine very early on was I like to run. I like to trail run. And when, I would get high and drunk and go trail running. So that was part of my thing. Then I got sober and I noticed that I was going to go right into that path of cross addiction with running. And I had to stop. And when I tell people my story that my cross addiction was something healthy, you should have seen the look I'd get on people's faces, or like, what's wrong with you? Or all these different things from that world. And it's crazy in the recovery world where you see people just grab onto something. They stop one substance, or they stop eating food, and they stop watching porn, or they stop gambling, and then they grab onto something else. And they think they're okay because they don't want to sit in that discomfort. And I think that's like you said, the most important thing is sit in that discomfort. And I've learned, Steve and I talked about lean into it and sit in it. It sucks. You're going to cry. You're going to have some bad days and bad times. But then you go to your connection. You go to your people you trust and you talk about it. And, that's where I'm interested, where you were talking about, you just did a lot of meditation and was in your head. Like, when you finally broke into talking Did that change anything?
Yeah. You mean talking about porn
Yeah.
and opening up
Yeah.
to other people? Yeah. I had done a lot of meditation and kind of inner work, but I still held on to a lot of that shame
You
around.
can't get rid of that shame, right? You got to give it away.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't give it away in isolation. The only way to deal with the shame is in connection, is to give it away to other people and let yourself be heard.
Yeah.
So opening up to other guys about it, it fundamentally changed my relationship with myself, where I realized, oh, I'm not a pervert. I'm not a bad person. I'm not broken. This is normal. Like having sexual desire is normal. Being a sexual being is normal. There's nothing wrong with me. I got engaged in some unhealthy behaviors and I need to get that in check, but I am not broken. So that's what opening up did for me.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead, Robbie.
No, I was just like, that's another, in a lot of the, step systems or whatever recovery things is, to connection and good and bad. I mean, sometimes there's not being able to talk about your feelings and your emotions in those certain circumstances and giving away your shame in certain groups and all that other stuff. But, once I was able to give it away and like you were saying, I'm okay. Like I'm not broken. Yeah, I had a little bump in the road. I'm going to get past it. Just part of the journey of life is very important too, is if, you hold on to that shame. And did you hold on to that shame for that 6 years when you were just doing your meditation and stuff like that? Or did it come and go? Or
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I clearly held on to some of it, because I didn't talk about it for 6 years. I think for me, just an interesting scenario where, because I had done all this mindfulness and meditation and really got in line with my values and my ethics, and I just wasn't acting out, I didn't really think about it all that much. So I wasn't living in shame because I wasn't actively engaged in the addiction. So I wasn't feeling a whole lot of shame, but clearly there was a part of me that didn't want to talk about my past. So it was still there. The seed of that was still there. And now it's completely gone, where I can talk about it and go on a podcast and, shout it from the rooftops. The first time I talked about it publicly, there was the time where I talked about it to a friend. That was the 6 years later thing. And then it was a couple years after that where I had been teaching meditation for a long time and started to notice that a lot of the guys I was working with were struggling with this and needed support. And so I decided to do like a Facebook Live where I talked about my history with porn addiction. And I was quite literally, not just metaphorically, I was on a rooftop in Chiang Mai, Thailand, sitting there. I went to the rooftop because I wanted to find a place where nobody else would be. I wanted isolation. And I remember I sat there, I typed in the title of the Facebook Live, and I sat there for probably 15 minutes, like waiting to push the live button, thinking like, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to talk about this? I'm scared to death. And I still have it. I've actually reposted it recently, that video of me kind of saying, hey, I want to talk about my history with porn addiction. And it was me shouting it from the rooftop and saying, hey, this is the thing that I went through. I know there are other guys who have gone through this. You're not alone. And it is difficult. But the more that we do podcasts like this and guys talk about it, the more it makes it safe for other guys to open up and say, yeah, I struggle with this.
The Me Too moment's kind of a freeing moment, even if you're sitting with yourself in isolation going, yeah, that was me too. It sucks. It's painful. But at the same time, that's one of those things that potentially gives someone the opportunity to reach out. I'm not the only one. How often did you think that you were the only one suffering, stuck in that spot where, like, I don't know what the fuck to do, but I want this to be done with, or like, this isn't working for me anymore, but go ahead and do it anyways. Like, you can't talk about it because that means I have to say to somebody, even if it's a therapist, that, I watch porn 2 hours a night. I don't want to say that shit out loud. No way. Especially not back then. No, not when today.
Nobody was talking about it.
Nobody was talking about it back then. Even today, we talk about it more today than we ever have. And I think it's important that we do. Before we get tying this one up, intimacy is not only a sexual thing, but you have a background, a history, I'll say, of addiction to porn and objectifying women and lusting and all of this, but still, like, being intimate with another woman and sharing your bodies together is still a basic human need. And so how did you go from, because today I'm sure you have relationships and you have a woman in your life and you've learned to do this now in a healthy way. So what does that look like? What are the challenges? How have you made this into like a healthy, good, intimate thing? Learned it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just unlearning.
Mm-hmm.
Unlearning the lessons we get taught from porn and all the sexualized content, like understanding that porn is a fantasy. It's not a realistic expectation of what sex looks like or intimacy looks like. I mean, we could have a whole podcast episode on the ways that the porn kind of industry is screwing with, young boys' perception of what intimacy looks like, but unlearning it, recognizing, hey, that's a fantasy.
Willing to do another podcast episode on just that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big one because it's not just the porn industry. It's now with AI girlfriends and AI generated porn and, all kinds of stuff about it is just like the subtle consequences, the subtle lessons that guys don't realize that they're learning. Like, I'll just give one example. In porn, you never ever see a girl saying, hey, I'm not interested right now, or hey, I don't want to have sex, and that actually being respected and the guy saying, okay, not tonight. You never ever see that.
No.
Because then it wouldn't be porn. And so imagine a young 10-year-old boy watching porn every night for 10 years. Every time he sees a guy making an advance, the girl kind of says, okay, let's do this. I'm into this. Even if the guy just has to push harder or demand it, then the girl ends up being into it. And so the subtle lesson he's learning is, if I make an advance, she should be interested. And the really scary thing is young girls are watching this too. And so young girls are also getting the lesson that I'm not allowed to say no. Because whenever I see sex, when the guy makes an advance, I have to look like I'm into it. And so these are some of the subtle lessons that slowly creep into guys over decades of watching porn. And so unlearning that is really important work, and realizing that intimacy is a conversation. It's a dance. There needs to be mutual respect. There needs to be understanding of, this is not just a fix you're getting. This is something more sacred than that.
Yeah. There was there's another thing too that would be an interesting topic. You mentioned women watching it, and some of that stuff gets really crazy with, kidnapping and robbery and all that stuff with young women watching this, that being a fantasy played out that they want. I think it's going both ways in some ways, where, men see this fantasy, then girls see this fantasy. Then on the flip side, the women that are actually getting paid to do this, what it's doing to them. We've seen plenty now come out and say they're ruining their lives and they're recovering from that. It's just a dangerous industry. Whereas, when I first got into it and found it, it was my dad's VCR tapes that I found and put it in there. And I was like, whoa, what's this? 14 years old, and was like blown away, right? It was very mild. It was lovemaking, soft porn,
In today's standards, it was, it was love.
It
making
was just,
for sure.
right. Now you get on there and you get on, like you're saying, a tube, and you do a search and you can do whatever you want. And you're talking about the novelty and more and more. And the point where, like you were saying, the unlearning, I'm sure there's men out there that have gone so deep that the unlearning is going to take a long time and a lot of work. And they have to be willing to do that work. And I'm happy that they can do that. But just thinking about that intimacy after that is going to be a lot of work. And the relationships they're going to be able to have in the future is going to be a lot of work. And like you were saying, it's a back and forth. And the earlier...
What I'll say, though, just on that note, it does take a lot of work, but I also want to give guys a lot of hope that you can see your natural sex life can rebound very quickly. You can see great, big transformations and big improvements in a short amount of time, particularly if you've been watching porn for a decade or 2 decades. Once you stop, you can actually recover a lot of what you had lost quite quickly.
That's
And
good
so
to
to
know.
not, I just don't want to give the impression that like, oh, if you've been watching for 20 years, it's going to take 20 years for you to get back to kind of a baseline. Like you can actually recover quite quickly. There are going to be some remnants and things to uproot over time, but healing can actually happen much faster than the addiction took.
I think that's true in all of recovery, right? Because we hear in alcohol, if you were a horrible alcoholic for 20, 30 years, it's going to take you 20, 30 years to get back to baseline. That's not true. We know that. The work you put in is what you're going to get out of it. And I think that's what's important is you got to put the work in to get something out of it.
Yeah.
So before we really hit the wrap up button on this, Jeremy, if there's anybody out there right now listening to this and thinking, man, I could really use some help, where can they find you, or where would you recommend them reach out to?
Yeah. If they're interested, first of all, in just learning more about this subject and, just kind of doing solo work on their own, if they're not yet ready to reach out to a community or get support, I have a podcast about this myself. Podcast is called Unhooked. It's on all the podcast platforms. It's on YouTube. So check out the Unhooked podcast. If they're in the stage where they want to get support and they say, okay, I need to be around other men who are working on this and I need a place where I can open up and be vulnerable and be seen. I do have an online program that guys can go through. So you can check that out at unhookedacademy.com. All the info's on there for guys to check out.
Awesome. I'm going to see if I can do something that would actually work. There it is.
There we go. That's the podcast.
That is the podcast that you have. I had it up here on the screen, so I thought I would test out the technology and see how it would work. But anyways, there's a little glimpse at it so our audience can see that if they want to hear some stories and hear what you have to say, if they want to look into some more resources. Jeremy, I want to say thank you for showing up, for sharing your story with us, sharing your solutions, and sharing what it was like with you. I really enjoyed hearing you speak and sharing that part of your life and your story. And thank you for being a part of the solution.
Appreciate you guys having me on. It was a fun one.
And I would also love for you to come back and talk about how porn is like destroying men and how all of that would happen. I'd love to put a podcast episode like that together. So
yeah, anytime.
Sweet. Awesome. Thank you so much. Listeners out there, if you liked this episode or like our content, please hit subscribe, leave a comment, reach out to Jeremy, reach out to any of us, really, if you do need any help or looking for support. We can definitely direct you in ways if we can't help you out. So until next episode, thank you all.